This episode is brought to you by our partnership with Suncoast Credit Union.
With my classrooms, I don't have rules. I have expectations.
Right.
Rules are made to be broken, and expectations are made to be met.
Okay, all right.
And so you raise the standard for what you want, and that's I don't talk about it. Well, you broke a rule. No, you haven't met my expectation, and the kids respond to that positively, and the parents respond. So you contact a parent and go, "Hey, Johnny is not meeting my expectations today. He won't stay in his seat. He won't be quiet. He's talking over me. He's bothering the other kids." Those are all things that are expectations, not rules. And the parent is quick to go, "Oh no, oh they'll do it tomorrow."
Right.
Don't worry. No,
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Kroon, for letting me know.
Welcome to another episode of the Ignite Project podcast. We're so excited that you got an opportunity to join us, whether it's for the first time or you're coming back and listening to us again. We're glad that you can make it and be here with us. So today we have a very special guest. I always say special because really he is special. So he has worked with our department prior to that and leading from the classroom. Aric Kroon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Just a little bit about your background for those who are listening. 16 years of experience, so
Yes,
you
ma'am.
are not the new kid on the block.
Not
so
anymore.
sorry. You are an aerospace teacher at Sleepy
Yes.
Hill Middle.
Yes.
Which is really unique because we haven't had an opportunity to share a lot about that. So I'd love to hear, or our listeners, if they could hear some of your background with that.
So we have a aerospace high school, Central Florida Aerospace Academy, and I'm a feeder school for that. So I take 6th, 7th, 8th grade and teach them just a little bit about aerospace, get them interested.
Yeah.
Cool field trips. We just went to Sun and Fun, took 117 kids to Sun
It's
and
a
Fun.
great field trip.
It was a great field trip. So we just introduce flight, introduce all the different kinds of careers they can have, expose them to as much stuff as we can, and then get them interested in the CFA.
Awesome. So with that, I wish we're not going to spend a whole hour talking about aerospace, but I'm sure you can because that's an interest of yours. But with that, we want to kind of focus on today about what it's like to communicate with families as a teacher, as well as engaging with families with that communication process. Being a previous teacher, I know that it can't always be easy communicating with families, but I come from an elementary side. So we have, at most I had 25 students that I had to reach out and contact parents with. Right. You have a lot more. You have middle school.
I have 138 this year.
That's a lot. So you really can't spend time, especially making brief phone calls, and whether they're positive or addressing things,
Exactly.
That's a lot of time consumption.
Right.
So focusing on talking about how to communicate with families. In a traditional sense, it really is this concept of if a student misbehaves, we pick up the phone, or at least try to, and call the parent and say, "Hey, this is the situation, help me out."
Right.
But we want to kind of shatter those four walls in that traditional sense. So I'd like to hear your importance or why you value communicating with parents so much and how it's really crucial in developing relationships.
I actually love to talk to parents. Not just about their kids' poor behavior in class. It really takes a turn on the other side. So I also spent 4 years as a dean.
Okay.
And so
that really has probably helped you with kind of...
Yes, trying to focus where I'm going to talk to them about.
Yeah.
So with students, or with parents actually, they don't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
They see Polk County Schools, or they see the school name, Sleepy Hill Middle, and they're like, nope, not picking that up. Or they blocked it.
Yeah.
And so I use Google Voice.
Okay.
That is my favorite platform to use. It allows me not only to discuss with parents and talk to them, but record my conversations.
Okay.
So the parent can't go back to my principal and say, well, he said this. No, I did not say this. And this is the context of what we've talked about.
Yeah.
I start off the year. It takes me about 2 weeks, but I start off the year and I contact every single one of my parents.
That's amazing.
About 10 to 15 kids a day, but it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
You just say, hey, I'm Mr. Kroon, I'm your kid's aerospace teacher, and this is how I'm going to be communicating with you all year long.
Right.
And then you also set boundaries. The boundaries is super important to set and say, hey, I'm only going to be talking to you through this from about 8 o'clock to about 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And so the parent knows that if they contact me after 5, I'm not going to see it. It's on my school computer, and I'm not going to see it until I get to school the next morning at 8:30.
Right.
So that's a really great thing because you have to have those boundaries. You don't want to
Right.
be answering a telephone call at 10 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know,
when everyone's exhausted
right.
or
and
overworked.
what's so important about that is that the parents are working so much. So we have nurses who can't take their phones.
Right.
And so they're not picking up the phone. They're not even seeing it. So they get on break. It's 10 o'clock. They're working the second and third shift. It's 10 o'clock. Oh, I got a one for Mr. Kroon. Well, let me text back. And I'm not going to receive that until the next morning.
Yeah.
But when you set that perimeter up first, then they definitely usually respect that.
I like that too because it opens up the door for transparency. And so it's more likely they're going to understand because you initially explain that to them as that
Right.
expectation. I also love the Google Mail phone number as far as like the fact that it records it, but we don't necessarily want to use that as a weapon or
Right.
like a defense mechanism. And so I know as a previous teacher with my perception why possibly parents don't necessarily pick up, but I'm interested to hear from you. Why do you think there's such hesitancy of picking up a phone when it has that PCPS?
Usually the kid's in trouble. When I was dean, I had all kinds of parents go, nope, not doing it.
Yeah.
Even one time where I went to Walmart and went to the layaway section and called from layaway, and the parent picked up, and I'm like, hey, this is Mr. Kroon, dean of students. We need you at the school. And so they're like, oh, crap, I picked up from Walmart. So those are things that, you know, they just don't want to pick up. And we've tried every number to reach you, and
Right.
no one's contacting you. And the next step in the discipline world would be sending an officer out to the house to check
Right.
on, is this the right phone number? Is this the right
Right.
address? So with that, and as a teacher, I've loved being able to say, hey, this is Mr. Kroon, and I don't have to worry about my principal going, did you call the parent? Have you done
Right.
this? So I've written 5 referrals all year, and I have some teachers who have written
35, 40.
35, 40.
Right.
And they always go, why do you not write referrals? I don't need to.
Right.
My kids know that as soon as they mess up, it's a parent phone call
Yeah.
or a parent text.
I think it really changes the tone and trying to reestablish this traditional sense and starting off strong in the beginning. Wendell Watson, the school that I really loved and worked at for 10 years, it was a precedent and an expectation that all teachers made a positive phone call to every family within the first 2 weeks. So
Right.
I love that you picked that time frame, and you even accomplished that with how many students that you have compared to what I have. And I remember just building relationships that way, and just I may not know a lot about that, but I've observed at least one thing that I
Right.
could say that I really have connected with, and kind of also ask questions. Do you have any questions so far about the homework, or have any questions about policies or expectations? Just kind of readapting that initial fear that parents may have of why is this being called, or here we go again. So it's almost this level of not PTSD, but like this embedded trauma that's
Right.
happening of the only reason why they call is because
Right.
I'm a bad parent, my student's in trouble. Here we go again. It's a repeated process. And so to counteract that is so crucial.
In the first month, I actually send a second text home and
Okay.
ask the parent, hey, is there something I need to know about your student? What would you like me to know?
Right.
And that works beautifully with the
Yeah.
parent because they're like, oh. And so they can tell me, hey, my
Yeah.
kid is this, or my kid does this, my kid's lazy, my kid's overactive.
Right.
They have ADD, Asperger's.
Yeah.
On
Whatever
the
the
spectrum,
case may be,
whatever
yeah.
the case may be, and you can kind of understand and know what you're getting into.
And I love the consistency. It opens up this familiarity of a safe place for them to open that communication with you,
Right.
and that you're taking it a step further. I would like you as a stakeholder to provide some of this information for me because I'm invested. And so I think that's such a relaxing way to show them, here are my boundaries and expectations, but I'm buying in. I want you there too. I need you there.
Right, and so another thing with a large list like 138, so I go start from the top on my
Yeah.
first period, work my way all the way to the end,
Yeah.
and then I start over and go back to the very first kid.
So how long does that second stream of things take place?
2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, and it will probably stretch into 4 weeks in between. But
Yeah.
the parents are always getting text messages, and then you get into a situation where you are in a parent conference, and they're like, "Well, we've heard from Mr. Kroon all year long. What about the rest of you?"
Right.
And then, and that's where the other teachers are kind of looking at you like, oh, no.
Oh man,
I haven't contacted. So,
yeah. And that's not to throw them under the table, but I think that really helps with student relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That is, when you, even in elementary school, you're co-teaching with someone, or they're in another classroom like specials, and you hear this feedback, but you're just like, I'm building that relationship currently, and this has really helped with minimizing and addressing misbehavior.
Right. And oftentimes in the classroom, do I need to text mom? And they're like, no,
Yeah.
please don't. And you can use it for...
Because they know it's legitimate.
They do.
It's so real.
Right. And you can also use it for a good positive thing. The kid comes in, he's looking kind of sad or upset. He had a bad day in another classroom, and so you okay, if you can be quiet the entire day and not talk and do your work, I'll text home and tell your mom how you did. And that's a good positive,
celebrations, anything that you notice.
Exactly.
It's a quick, easy thing. And I think that's a really good thing to do, as well as focus on the ratio of how often you communicate and what you're communicating about, and just tracking that, because naturally it is tendency for us to say, oh, if in a perfect setting, we won't ever have to contact the parents because they're doing everything they're told.
Exactly.
But in the same essence of, how does that kid feel when you're not also investing and celebrating? And, that to me is a little bit of a disconnect.
It is.
That we're missing out on.
Absolutely. So it is a lot of fun to talk to the parents and always be there for them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're having a hard time at home. The kids are going through something, and another thing that I do with my classrooms, I don't have rules. I have expectations. Rules are made to be broken, and expectations are made to be met.
Okay, all
and
right.
so you raise the standard for what you want, and that's I don't talk about it. Well, you broke a rule. No, you haven't met my expectation, and the kids respond to that positively, and the parents respond. So you contact a parent and go, "Hey, Johnny is not meeting my expectations today. He won't stay in his seat. He won't be quiet. He's talking over me. He's bothering the other kids." Those are all things that are expectations, not rules. And the parent is quick to go, "Oh no, oh they'll do it tomorrow." Don't worry. Thank you, Mr. Kroon, for letting me know.
Yeah.
And never a problem, because the parent is on my side instead of. No, I wouldn't really say instead of the kid's side, but we're all working for him together.
Right. Kids mess up and make mistakes or have off days, as well as teachers.
Absolutely.
But to understand the unity of, instead of a teacher versus a student or teacher versus a parent or family member, it is a unit. And so I think that's the important part, that you have to actually meet them first. Like the initial step of you contacting them, you have to meet them, because you want to build respect and earn their trust and respect, not demand it, not expect it. And so that also goes two ways with the student. And then it's just universal with the communication, the trust. A lot of it just really links and syncs together. So let's talk about new teachers, or teachers who are introverts, because I know you're an extrovert, getting to know you this year. You have two extroverts in the room, so it's not as hard. But introverts, I can hear them listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, I do not like to talk. I do not like to have a phone call with anybody. I mostly text. So let's kind of talk about some go-to strategies for them. If I know I don't do well initiating a lot of those things because it's hard for me, what could you suggest for them?
That's the beauty of Google Voice. You don't have to call. It's almost all text. And yes, and so you can call. Yeah. And oftentimes what I do with the text is, if there's an issue, I text them first and say, "Hey, I'm calling from my my desk phone. Please pick up." And so that gives them a segue. Okay, I need to get ready for this phone call that's coming.
I like
but
that.
Most of the Google Voice, you can text the entire thing. So you just copy and paste right from a Word document what you want to say, and then you can put it into each one.
Gotcha.
Now the problem comes, so a person talked to me about this, was what if all 7 period teachers say the same thing? And yes, that could be, but you have to tweak it for yourself. You have to understand what you're just trying to get across to the parent, and then work on yourself. And the good part is that if I'm working 1 through 138. I'm going to be at a different interval than the next door teacher who has that same student in English. And another teacher in math. They're not going to call at the same time. So they're not going to get 7 phone calls right away that say, "Hey, I'm your I'm your student's teacher.
Yeah.
So they can kind of break it up. Break up the number of times. I do a little more contacting than I think a lot of teachers might.
Right.
You could do it once a quarter, once a semester.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend doing it more.
Yeah.
Because
always encourage me too.
Right. Because and really you'll start getting like towards Christmas or winter break, you start seeing an increase in parent phone calls.
Right.
Expectations are.
Yeah, don't wait until grades are due.
Right.
Do not wait until these crucial moments. I think it's so, like we said, it takes time, but it's worth it. So to invest in that and then see that turnaround so much later in the year, you'll be able to recognize why we encourage you to do that.
Exactly.
I love the initial phone call, but I also love the fact that maybe once a month, if you're shy or introverted, maybe do a phone call like once every other month, but still be consistent with it. And then use text most of the time. I know that some of our elementary school teachers or middle school use Classroom Dojo, where there's a lot of points or text-based system. Remind 101 is a good text-based system. Right. But don't let that be that. Have multiple platforms of communication.
You can do it in both. And then there is an app on your phone, so you can download it, call from your phone, and it will use the number, the Google number.
But mask it.
So they're not calling your phone.
Personal phone at 8 o'clock at night.
And then you understand when Google calls you, it says, please accept a number from, and it'll give the name.
Gotcha.
And you press 1 for good, 2 for no. Just press no and wait for the next day.
Right.
And when you can answer it.
So it still allows you to keep those boundaries, but it's notifying you.
It's
when
notifying,
you're
hey, the parent needs. And you can kind of look and say, okay, this is what I'm going to have to deal with in the morning.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to get there 15, 20 minutes early and deal with this parent first thing.
Yeah, and if you're not a Google user, I know there's a couple other apps and things out there, especially when COVID hit, that I think really opened the door for several communication platforms. And so that's just one of them. And there's so many out there that you can use. So going on, how you've talked about how often you call and kind of giving some of those tips. Have you, over the period of time, found some things that are really most important that are like, these are my main things that I focus on when I'm making phone calls?
Yes. The biggest thing for me is grades. That's the parents are like, well, I didn't get that.
Yeah.
The kid's not going to bring home their interim report. And now we have ways to email, we can text it.
They can pull it up on their phone
and see. But so many parents are like, well, I've lost that code, or I've lost that number, or I'm not on that. So I take my list of kids and then I pull their grades backwards. So I start with my Fs.
Right.
And I work down
the urgent to the not so urgent.
Right. So I may not have to call my C's, B's, and A's.
Right.
But my D's and F's, I need to send home a message saying, hey, your kid, and they can make up. It's online. It's on Schoology. It's
giving them tangible steps and doing it. How far in advance do you normally do that? So it's not
3
just
weeks before the 9 weeks ends.
Gotcha. So that's a good amount of time for them to be able to get into gear and kind of save their space.
And you don't wait to the very last week. And usually in my class, I don't have that many D's and F's, so it may only be 10 phone calls.
Yeah.
And usually they come back and they'll preface it by, do you have a computer at home? And they're like, no. Then I have to make arrangements to get them out of PE, to get them out of one of their other electives, to come in and make up the work.
Which, if you build that trust and relationship, it shows a lot to the student that you're willing to contribute what you need and the resources you have to ensure they're meeting that deadline. I love that you're asking and understanding the whole situation, but you can't do that unless you have communication, especially with parents about, internet connection or availability, laptop broke, or we just have cell phones, and whatever that case may be.
Right. And so with that, you can tell the parent, okay, I'll do the work on my end. If they do have internet, then they can do it at home, and the parent can watch over them and make sure they turned it in.
Right.
But if not, then I know I need to do some work on my end to pull them from different classes. And then the parent sees, hey, he's invested in my student. He's working to make my student do what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so.
How long, I'm always interested about this because I taught for 10 years and I know that I have gone through a lot of learning opportunities and mistakes that I've made. So how long has it taken you really to kind of discover this process that's worked for you? Just to reassure some other teachers out there.
Probably over about 10 years.
Okay.
I started as a new teacher.
Yeah.
I had several people tell me, hey, communicate with parents. And it was not, we didn't have the texting the same.
Yeah.
I still had a Palm Pilot when I started. So
do the math, y'all.
Do the math. And as apps have come into play, there's been more and more and more. I would say over the last 5 years, especially because of COVID, Google Voice has really come a long way.
Yeah.
I would love to get with someone and try to change a few things for teachers.
Yeah.
Be able to import numbers through Excel and then be able to tick off when you call the
right. So you keep it tracking.
You can keep track, and then the administration likes to see those kinds of things. Okay, you contacted this kid.
So that's funny because we developed something similar to that. My colleague and myself, we would obviously have a sheet of paper we had to turn into administration for copies and legal aspects of things. However, we created our Excel spreadsheet and had the check marks, and then we were able to, as soon as we had a conference with a parent, we were able to pull up the last time we talked about this, or here is some things that we addressed last time, and they're improving. They're coming along way. So it's also a great conversation starter when you keep track of the progress of your students. Now, we know it's not going to happen perfectly, but to be able to make that initial step and to keep track and to kind of show that record for you, it's a safe place, but it also really shows the parents that you care. When you pull out a copy, you can just kind of focus on their student, keep everybody else anonymous, and show like, hey, here are the things. And I think that speaks volumes to parents or families who are understanding that you're not just I'm only calling when they've made a bad choice.
Right. Another good thing about Google Voice is once you have made that initial contact and you know that it's a good number, you can go and say, hey, type in Mallory. Yeah. And it will pull up every text that you've done.
It's got a record.
Got a record. As long as you put the name in there
and save it.
And don't do what I did. And so I have 2 Faiths this year.
Okay.
And I mistakenly put Faith and didn't put the last name.
Right.
And so it was not good because the parent got on to the wrong Faith.
Right.
And then like an hour later, I get a phone call.
I'm so sorry.
And they keep blowing my phone up through Google Voice. And I'm like, I better look and see what I've done. And they're like, are you sure it's my daughter? She claims. And I'm like, oh, it's the wrong Faith. So I made that big mistake this year.
Mistake.
Yeah. But you just put the name in there, and it'll pull up all the text.
So it's automatically got a record. Just being able to organize it and capture it, that could be something that you have to do until you find something.
And when you're going back through, you can see what you last written, and then you can say, hey, this has gotten better, but now we need to work on this.
Right. Having actionable steps or goals based on what it already has recorded for you.
Right.
I love that. I definitely have had some really great phone calls. I remember one of the phone calls to my parents. I get mocked about this all the time, but it is what it is. We ended up connecting so well that it was like the second week of school, and it was a 2-hour-long phone call, just talking and sharing ideas and thoughts, and the rest of the year just was amazing with that parent and that family, and it really sets the tone. But we all also know that sometimes the reason why we're hesitant about phone calls or communication because possibly the defensive end, or trying to better understand that parent maybe has not had a great experience prior to a couple teachers, and so they might be a little hurt or burnt on that. So how do you approach difficult, hard conversations with parents while still maintaining positivity and professionalism?
Positivity. And that's difficult. Most students, and this is my experience, students who are having a hard time more than likely had a parent who had a hard time. You can go back and look at students who have test anxiety. Often have parents who had test anxiety, and they start doting on their kids. Well, if you do, you should do good on your test. Are you sure you're ready? And then so that just feeds into that kid's paranoia that I'm not going to do well. Right. So personal experiences, figuring out when you first start talking to parents at the beginning of the year, you can kind of see where it's going to go later on down the road. Okay. And you always know in your first 3 weeks of who your problem kids are going to be all year long because of their activities. And even though you've told them, hey, I'm calling your parents. Okay, call them. Right. And you're like, whoa, that wasn't the response I was looking for. But
They're not nervous or scared about that.
So, and then you have the parents go, well, he's yours for 8 hours. And you have those parents as well. And yes, but I need him to not distract all the other 30 kids in my classroom right now. So can you help me out? And when you ask for that help, when you call, say, hey, Mallory, I need your help with your student. I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to meet his expectation. What can I do for him?
Right.
And then they'll start talking.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to kind of get over the hump with those difficult parents, and you do have them.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of going to your other teachers in your group, and you look and see who's on their their schedule, and go, okay, so you have this one, so let me go talk to them. And you look and see who your teachers have who have the most experience. So we have Mr. Bowman, who's a former teacher of the year, and I can go to him and say, okay, what are you doing with this one? How can I better?
What's worked for you?
Right. How can I better meet his needs? And then we'll talk. And so that gives you an opportunity to discuss with other teachers how, to best suit. Because if you're doing something right, and he's doing it in your room, then I need to bring that same behavior into my room and try to help the kid.
And not necessarily get sucked into the tunnel of, oh my gosh, you had this kid, I had this kid, it didn't work. But I love that you're focusing on what strategy worked for this kid because you've had this student. And I love some insight of how to communicate with the parents and hone in on that of what's working so I can adapt that. So it's a little bit easier for me, but then I'm also developing trust and a safe place for them because it's familiar with them.
Right.
I love that. Especially with the new teachers, look to your veteran teachers. Also talk to maybe your deans or APs who are, or instructional coaches sometimes, often specials teachers, anybody and everybody to get that advice.
Right.
And don't necessarily be as hesitant to contact them. You want to get over that hump, like you were saying, shake off those nerves and just take care of it the first couple of weeks.
And it's not as hard once the first 3 texts have been positive.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes because of those 3 positive texts, you don't have the issues that some others have, or you're picking on. Well, Mr. Kroon talks to me all the time. Why are you behaving this way in this class? I've had that quite a bit with a parent, and I haven't heard from you, so I don't know how to help you on that one. But with kids, and then you have to also watch their behavior. You can tell a decline. So what has happened in the past? This is another good thing to ask the parent. What has happened in the past 3 weeks that would have triggered this behavior?
That's so good.
Because this is a new behavior from the student.
Good.
And you're like, wow. And then they'll go, well, dad left or mom left or grandfather passed away. And these kids are holding some serious things behind the scenes.
Yes.
And so you don't know. And all of a sudden you'll see, well, this kid just slid off the route that we're taking. I don't know what happened. And you can talk to them after class. You can talk to them before class. Say, hey, I'm trying to help you here, and I just noticed a slide in your grades, a slide in your behavior. But you got to have that communication with the kid. And I know with a podcast that I was listening to, having those relationships with those kids is just as important as having the relationship with the parent.
I think they go together.
They go together.
Yeah.
So and then you hear, well, Mr. Kroon's my favorite. Why? Okay.
Not just because he lets us do whatever we want. It is because there is like a solid foundation relationship that you've cultivated.
They like boundaries.
Yes.
Students love boundaries. They say they don't, but they really
don't let them fool you.
They really do like when you can place a boundary around them, and it's a protected feeling. It's a you're protecting them.
Safe,
Safe environment.
They trust you. They're leaning in to guide you what your guidance is, whether they get that at home or not, or outside of the classroom or not. And there is something special about when a student even does make a poor choice and usually doesn't, and that reaction or response is because you've been consistent in communication, they're more likely to get back into the swing of things or push through and get the work done, or really not necessarily please you, because that's not what we're here, is for them to make us happy, but they honestly want to invest in the relationship, and they understand how weighty it is. And so I love that dynamic that you've cultivated with your students.
You have a previous podcast with Adam Smith.
Yes,
and
he's amazing.
He said something
Shout
in there.
Out Adam Smith.
He said something I really like. You have 180 days to restart, and you can't let what the kid did yesterday, even though it may have really hurt your feelings or really aggravated you. You can't let that bleed into the next day.
Yeah.
And you meet them at the door and go, okay, new day,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Can we also add that about family too? Like,
Yes.
I'm gonna throw that in there just for this conversation. We're in the business of human beings, and so we know that when students have off days, so do parents, right?
Absolutely.
Things are happening to parents, and they have to take that on. And a conference with you or a conversation with you could have been the cherry on top, so to speak, in the wrong sense. The volcano could have erupted just because you were the last drop. And so we want to have that same mentality with families and parents, so that we know that every single day it's a greater opportunity to draw them in and build that relationship.
Right. And in a parent conference, it's 7 teachers against 1 parent.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they do feel overwhelmed. You're getting 7 bad news.
I would too. 7 versus 1.
Seven buckets of guilt and 7 buckets
So
of
true.
And so they're sitting there and they're gonna oftentimes speak out and say things that in anger or hurt,
because they want to justify they're doing the best they can with what they have.
Exactly.
And as teachers, we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Right.
And it's so crucial to connect that bridge.
The parents are giving you their best.
Yes.
And so you have to kind of look at that and take it, and then not get hurt when they get upset.
Right.
In a meeting.
Right.
And when I was a dean at one of the other schools, I had it was not the greatest of schools in regards to the student population, but I only had 3 kids cuss me out.
Yeah.
I was the dean, and 2 were in handcuffs. And so they all came back to me and said, Mr. Kroon, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said those things.
Yeah.
And why? Because you have those relationships, and they know they made a mistake.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
They know those boundaries.
We're good. Move on. Don't do that again. What did you learn? Are you going to make that mistake again? I feel like I'm repeating from Adam.
No,
but,
it's okay. Well, and it should be repetitive, because that's the goal, right? I think that we can share strategies, and a lot of teachers are doing very similar things that you're doing.
Right.
So if people listening, if you're doing the same stuff, you're on the right track. You're doing okay.
Right.
But it's for the people who are struggling with how to connect, and that connection is so different nowadays than what it was 10 years ago. And it's weird I can say that because I feel like I'm getting old, but it is different. And so you have to be the one to say, I'm going to be flexible and creative with how to connect with families, because that's number 1 in building student relationships.
It is. And the good part about text is they can hear it, sit on it, let it soak in, and then respond.
On maybe how they're going to respond.
Right, because you make that phone call and you're like, your kid's not meeting my expectations in class. When
and then
you
you're
talk to them,
waiting live, and you're just like, okay.
Right. Another piece of advice: if you're calling from your school phone, your desk phone, your closed, or even your phone with the app, do not place the parent on speaker.
Oh no. Okay, let's pause and really hone in on this, you guys. Do not put the parent on speaker. Anonymity, private conversation is coveted. It's so crucial. I will say there are some outliers where you have to have administration present, where those are the weighty calls that your admin, you trust them, do that. But yes, do not have other teachers in the room. I know that I was a co-5th grade teacher, so we very clearly stated, is it okay if the other teacher is on the call with us, so we can talk about what's happening in both classrooms, but you need to initially state that before you put them on a phone call, before anybody else is listening. That is a safety thing, protection for the child, the family as yourself.
And oftentimes with the text, you can type out what you want to say.
Yeah.
Pull the kid up into the computer and go, is this what you want me to text home? Really?
I love the stakeholder. Yeah.
Right. And then they're like, no, please don't put that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I will press send if you don't sit down and start meeting my
show me that you need changed.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they'll go sit down, they do what they do, and then you erase it, and then you can go back and say, hey, today was not the best day for
but they turn
Johnny,
it around.
But they turn it around and just want to say I appreciate their change midstream.
That's so good.
Because that's sometimes hard for them to do. So those are all benefits that you have from text. And you can also, just like an angry email, when you text a parent, you're just going through.
Rant, rabbit hole.
Right, you get that. And you can focus what you, I don't like how that sounds, and rewrite it and then send it, because if you're in the middle of being angry at the student.
Never good. Please don't ever do that. Phone call, text, email.
Right.
When you yourself are not in a professional mode.
Absolutely. And we have that.
Clearly.
We have that, quite a bit. And we're
Agreed. We got to set ourselves
I gotta
apart.
wait.
Take a break.
Take a break. I may not want to send that in 10 minutes. So let's fix that.
Right. All right. So on every episode, this is our favorite question to ask. If you could pick one area in education to spark change and ignite a shift in behavior and mindsets, what would it be? So I want to ignite ...
Wow.
And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be related to this.
Okay. Let's see. There's so many. And I did think about this on the way over, and now I'm blanking. So
no pressure.
No pressure. It's so important. I'm going to lead back to this.
Yeah.
Communication. If the entire school did it, if the entire staff was consistent on this, our numbers of referrals, our numbers of bad phone calls are going to go down, and the school is going to go back up. Yeah. And I see it so often where the first thing I ask a new teacher or even a veteran teacher is like, well, have you called home on this? And they're like, no. And then I try to help lead them through the process of let's do this.
Yeah.
And I help them set up Google Voice, or I help them set up Remind, and let's have a little conversation with the parent.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, okay. And I guess that's that getting over the hump with even the veteran teachers who have just, they don't like the bad phone calls either.
Right.
But unless you put in the good stuff at the beginning and really try to connect with the parent and the student, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my number one
Ignite communication.
Right.
Dr. Brene Brown mentions that clear is kind. And so clear communication is a beautiful thing for everybody.
Right.
And just simply planning out what you're going to write and having somebody, a peer, a mentor, experience, check what you're going to say is always a good backup plan as well.
Absolutely.
So, I think this is amazing stuff. I love this. So I'm really excited that you were able to join us for today's episode.
Thank you
it's
for having me.
roll out soon. So I love that you were a guest, and it's good stuff, you guys. You guys share it with everybody you know. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Are you fired up? You can continue to fuel the fire by connecting with us here in Teacher Engagement. Every month, we host virtual all-teacher seminars, and we also have ongoing programs designed to support teachers wherever they're at in their teaching career. Whether you're a new teacher or a teacher leader, there is a way to get plugged in. Follow us on social media at TeachEngagePCPS to see all that we have going on. Let's keep that spark alive and join forces with others who have chosen to stay ignited.
Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to the Ignite Project on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or watch online at the Polk County Public Schools YouTube channel. To learn more about the Ignite Project and other Polk County Public Schools podcasts, go to polkschoolsfl.com/podcasts.